Fall Out Boy music videos are weird. Antler Boy's father-in-law has internalized deer phobia, campy vampire short film, an episode of Happy Tree Friends, llamas, a wizard has transformed Joe into a large raccoon, an infomercial, what my fever dreams look like, the collapse of the space-time aquarium. They make some weird stuff. But the Youngblood Chronicles is definitely its own beast. It started off pretty standard. Fall Out Boy returned from indefinite hiatus in 2013 and dropped a music video to go with their return single, My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark. The video, as most music videos are, was intended to be standalone. Just 2 Chainz and a couple lovely ladies burning all their shit in a bonfire. It ended with a visual implying the 4 members of the band tied up in the back of a van with bags over their heads, and that was supposed to be it. And then they decided to make 10 more videos building a narrative around that first one, with torture and murder and cannibalism and a death cult and a snake and funky demon eyes, and when I was in middle school I followed each new release obsessively and it rewired my brain so hard that I still go a little nuts every time I think about it. So let's talk about the Youngblood Chronicles. In 2021, I hit a mental low that led to me retreating hard into my comfort playlist of most of Fall Out Boy's discography and ending up in the 0.01% of their listeners in Spotify Wrapped that year. I'm very normal. Part of that coping method included revisiting the Youngblood Chronicles for the first time since I was about 14, I think. It's always a different experience, coming back to something as an adult, and that revisit nestled the film into the back of my head enough for it to keep resurfacing, particularly with the release of their most recent album. And I want to crack it open like a geode full of blood and examine why that might be. What makes it good? To me, at least. In order to do that, I'm going to take us through each music video one by one and dissect them individually through the lens of a primary sub-theme as it relates to the central theme of the overall narrative, dehumanization. Then we'll come back to the story as a whole and discuss the sum of the parts. Quick disclaimer before we get started. Obviously, the band and its members, as well as any featured artists in this series, are playing fictionalized equivalents of themselves. It should go without saying that as I discuss YBC as a functionally standalone piece of art, I will be referring to the characters, not the real-life people. This is artistic analysis, I'm not a band historian, and I'm not here to provide much real-life context or trivia. I'm personally more interested in examining this piece of art in a context that doesn't require any knowledge of the actual band outside of the fact that they're musicians who exist, and they're friends with each other. I'm also not going to get into biblical analysis, so if that's what you want, you're in the wrong place. That part of it doesn't interest me, and I don't have the knowledge to unpack it. I'm just here to be my specific brand of mentally ill in front of you for however long this thing ends up being. Get in, sugar, we're going down swinging. Part 1. My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, and Destruction. Now, if you watch the uncut long-form film version of the Youngblood Chronicles, which is my preferred method personally, it's cut together following the linear narrative rather than the chronological release order, so this part comes fourth, not first. However, I find it necessary to start here for this, if only because it feels a little bit difficult to discuss this video as it falls linearly, since it wasn't initially conceived as fitting into a whole. The resulting narrative was cobbled together later using this as a foundation. On the surface, it achieves what your standard music video should. The video matches the tone of the song, and the visuals implement a consistent theme in the lyrics. Fire. Taking it a little deeper, it lays the groundwork for tone and tension that the rest of the series has to maintain. It does this easily, by burning everything you love. 2 Chainz and these ladies destroy beloved, iconic records, instruments, and iconography of Fall Out Boy and revel in it. This song and video was their return from hiatus. They're back and they're brand new. Nostalgia is dead, but it's not the band doing it. And after 2 Chainz busts out the flamethrower and the destruction reaches its peak, we see why. They've been kidnapped and tied up in the back of a van. This is where it starts. This is the genesis of the Youngblood Chronicles. It's cool to watch, and it's a little uncomfortable at the same time. That's basically the experience you can expect from the rest of the series to come. It's engaging in a very simple way, and it leaves you with questions, but you know the answers aren't anything good. Part 2. The Phoenix and Betrayal. The Phoenix takes us back to the beginning, a few days before the events of My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark. We're introduced properly to our 4 main players and the MacGuffin of this story, the briefcase. What's in it? We don't know, but the band does, and by reaction alone, it seems pretty important. They handcuff it to Patrick, and off he goes. Where's he going? We, again, don't know, but he's walking through a quiet suburban neighborhood, singing like a nutcase and looking around like he's expecting to be attacked. And he's not too far off, 'cause, this lady. She's coming. Patrick. Patrick, turn around. She's gonna get you. Oh god, he can't hear me. He's got AirPods in. So Patrick sees this kid, Sam, because that's the actor's name, on his bike. And what do you do when you're casually perusing quiet suburbia and definitely not carrying something incredibly important that you're so desperate not to lose you locked it to one of your body parts? You smile politely at an innocent-looking kid on his bike, of course. In this brief moment of unassuming human connection, seeing this kid and warmly acknowledging his existence for no other reason than, hey, that's another person, Patrick lets his guard down. For a couple seconds, he experiences reprieve from the vague, stressful situation that having this briefcase attached to him entails. Then it ends. This is the first instance of the theme I want to discuss for this particular video. Betrayal. Sam betrays Patrick. Basic decency betrays Patrick. An attempt at human connection betrays Patrick. And from this point on in the story, Patrick is consistently treated as less than human. He doesn't even get his glasses back. Do me a favor and keep that in mind. For the rest of these, he's got no glasses. Imagine going through this whole ordeal with blurry vision. I'd start killing too. This is where our core theme is introduced. All 4 members of the band are dehumanized consistently throughout the coming narrative, but it begins with Patrick, and his thread is the most direct. Even the song, its chorus, sounding for the first time as Patrick appears in this warehouse, seems to know this. The line, effectively foreshadows the arc of the band as a whole, but more directly it foreshadows what's going to happen to Patrick. These women, the Vixens, cut off Patrick's hand to get to the briefcase, already showing his only real worth to them is as a tool. Then they send their messenger to Pete's house. Pete is in bed with a woman, and while you may think this is just to capitalize on sex appeal, you're absolutely right, and YBC has an uncomfortable tendency of sexualizing the women it features. This time it's plot relevant, though. Patrick's hand, identifiable by the symbol by its thumb, is a declaration of war. Pete sends a call out to his other 2 allies, Andy and Joe, both of whom are intercepted by Vixens before they can respond. They're knocked out in public places with no one around to notice or care. Then Pete, the last one standing, gets taken out by the woman he was just in bed with. Someone he seemed to trust. Each kidnapping happens in broad daylight, 3 in explicitly public places. The Vixens hide in plain sight, and there's no one around at any point to help the band. 2 direct human betrayals take place, but the quietest is the betrayal of the suburban civilization, of monotony and common, uninteresting places. A parking lot and the civilians who watch Andy get tackled into a van. A gas station, and how I don't question that nobody who may have been there in the middle of the day noticed Joe getting chloroformed. This video shows an innocent kid, a trusted partner, and general civilization betray and abandon the band, isolating them from here on out from anyone but each other. It's this feeling of quickly realizing that whatever this is, they're in it alone. They have been betrayed, they will be betrayed again, and they have no one. Part 3. Young Volcanoes and Disorientation. Young Volcanoes is an exercise in unnerving juxtaposition. Patrick, whose torture and consistent struggle was the central thread of The Phoenix, is now seen sitting at the head of a candlelit dining table, snapping and singing, not exactly jovially, but the song is upbeat and he's pretty unbothered. When Rome's in ruins, we are the lions, free of the Colosseums. He's still tied up, but he doesn't seem to mind. There's an IV in his hand. He's drugged to high heaven and he's lost a lot of blood. Contrast to Patrick's demeanor is that of his bandmates as they're led in by the Vixens. They're blindfolded, but aware of the danger, while Patrick can see everything, but is pumped so full of relaxants he's unconcerned. This is such an anxiety-inducing dichotomy. The threat being right in front of you, your friends screaming and afraid right in front of you, and not having the capacity for awareness to care. The end goal for this section is immediately clear, getting the remaining 3 band members into the same state that Patrick is in. It unfolds easily. They're all excessively drugged out of fear and into hazy confusion, guards not lowered but broken down, and force-fed this messy feast, including but not limited to, Patrick's innards. He's downgraded below a fellow victim at this point. He is their meal. Then the lights come up, the rope comes undone, and the blindfolds come off. It's a party, and all your friends are here. Eat, drink, dance, live it up. The danger's in plain sight wearing bloody animal masks. You're free from your bondage and you aren't gonna do anything about it. Why would you? You're too high to know any better. You're with friends, you're fed, and you feel good. It's a party.
And all of a sudden, there was boobs.
And then there's boobs! Oh, no! I've seen those a couple, maybe once.
For the duration of this segment, the band has no idea where they are, who's around them, what's in their bloodstream, what they're huffing, drinking, or eating. And at the point where their bonds and blindfolds are removed and all they get to know is they're together, they've all been sedated to the point that that's all that matters. The upbeat, dance-encouraging, somewhat triumphant song contrasts perfectly with the disturbing visuals of restraints, cultish animal masks, and forced feeding and drugging to create a super disorienting, unnerving experience. By the end, they're back in their seats, restrained and blinded again, stained with the blood of their feast. Was the party even real? It doesn't matter. The party's over, and it's only just begun. Part 4. Alone Together and Torture. The opening shots of this segment show our MacGuffin being handed off to a mysterious head honcho in a car with a license plate reading Rat-a-tat. And if you have album literacy, you already know when we see this lady, it's going to be Courtney Love because she's the featured artist on the song Rat-a-tat. What's she up to? Why does she need the briefcase? What's in the briefcase? Shut up! It's torture time! Patrick's in a chapel, hooked up to machines by the temples. Pete's on a red carpet surrounded by lights, cameras, and mannequins. Joe's on a stage illuminated in spotlights, and Andy's in what looks like a mock-up of a 70s living room set with headphones on and a camcorder filming him. The obvious central theme in this sequence is the torture they're being put through, more specifically the way they're each stripped of autonomy and made a spectacle. Each torture setting is individualized to represent a specific fear regarding the industry, so I'm going to go one by one and address what each torture represents, and then give you my take on the literal torture this translates to. Let's start with Andy. The old-fashioned aesthetic, paired with the member who's an anarchist metalhead in real life, is certainly representative of pressure to conform to regressive standards of the past, and inability to progress. In terms of the literal torture happening to him, though, a common take I've seen in comment sections is that he's being forced to listen to bad music, which is, lame. I personally think Andy is being deafened here, and that is a take shared by the artist behind the Youngblood Chronicles webcomic adaptation, which is very cool. I started reading that a few months before I started writing this video, and I was happy to see somebody agreed with me. Go read that comic if you're interested in a more developed version of this story, by the way. It's pretty good. I'll link it in the description. Back to Andy. He notably manages to somewhat escape his torture by struggling enough to topple himself and get the headphones off. He's not freed, but his struggle gives him reprieve at the end of the sequence and, presumably, saves his ears. Joe's turn. Symbolic to the industry, Joe's torture represents being isolated in the public eye and subject to ridicule and mockery, being reduced from a person to something to point and laugh at, and being expected to perform constantly. There isn't much to draw from for a harsher torture than what's literally happening on screen, which is an unfortunate shortcoming because Joe's torture really stands out as significantly less intense than the others. Like, obviously, being pelted with food by taunting children isn't pleasant, but in comparison with the other three, it's pretty tame and lacks punch. Regardless, Joe gets no reprieve from this and is tormented into exhaustion. Next is Patrick. Patrick's torture has probably the most obvious symbolism, being changed by the industry, losing yourself and becoming something you'd never want to be. I've seen some divide in interpretation of what's literally being done to him, between whether it's some kind of demonic possession or brainwashing. I think the visual of the yellow eyes is what muddies it a bit, but the rest of the visuals, the setup of his torture, and generally the way it all seems to function going forward really communicates brainwashing to me. I think the eyes are just a means of easily communicating the difference between Patrick in his right mind and Patrick in a trance state. I do not think they put a demon in him. I think the electric current being fed into his brain gradually overwhelms him with painful stimuli, putting him through sensory overload until he's too mentally exhausted to resist whatever information he's receiving. He's weak and primed for suggestion, and the pains heightened his aggression. He, like Joe, gets no reprieve and submits. Also, little note, I love the detail that he stops singing once the conditioning breaks him. It's so simple, but it's great. Last up, Pete. Pete's torture represents the relentless gaze of the public and the media. It can be inferred that since the vixen tormenting Pete has the hook, had his torture progressed, it would have gotten violent. I can imagine photographing him stabbed, slashed, and bleeding, taking the media obsession with catching celebrities at their worst to a truly visceral level. However, Pete reclaims agency over his scenario and takes advantage of the vixen's sexually targeted aggression to escape and kill her. Free and armed with the hook, Pete takes off and finds Big Sean. We don't see much of his personal torment, but one guess I've seen is torture by solitude. Sean is granted escape by Pete using his regained autonomy to free an ally. He grants the same to Patrick, or tries to, but Patrick resists, reduced to a trance state where he doesn't seem fully aware of his surroundings. but due to whatever conditioning he's already received, views Pete as a threat. Pete ends up cauterizing Patrick's wound with the hook, but fails to free him and gets taken out by a trank. That first glimmer of hope, the chance of escape brought by Pete taking back his agency, is ripped away again. They remain at the mercy of the Vixens, loaded into the back of a van. The collective torment and loss of agency is the unifying thread of tension, but they keep it engaging with the varying levels. Pete regains his and takes action, however brief, giving the band a sliver of hope in Sean. Andy doesn't escape, but his relentless struggle lessens his torment and he avoids the worst of it. Joe gives in to exhaustion, but remains in his own mind. Patrick loses grip of his and never entirely gets it back. Part 5. The Mighty Fall and Defeat. Fall Out Boy get their shit wrecked by a bunch of kids in this one. We pick back up where My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark left off. The van's been set on fire and the band uses Patrick's new hook,
Thanks, Pete.
to escape. But they're not out of the woods yet, and by that I mean they're literally in the woods and there's a gang of kids, all armed and out for blood. Most notably, the return of Sam. The band peels off in different directions, each pursued by two kids who proceed to catch and beat the absolute fuck out of them. Save for Patrick, pursued by Sam and his boombox. When Sam hits play, the music activates Patrick's conditioning, but only for as long as it takes for Big Sean to run in, snap Sam's neck, and shut the music off. Fuck them kids. Sean's interception gives Patrick his self-control back and lets him escape, paying forward what Pete did for Sean. Sean isn't so lucky this time, though, and gets caught and killed by the Vixens. This segment is a notable, weird moment in YBC because, like, what's up with these kids, right? And how do they beat these grown men so easily? Well, for one, because these grown men choose flight, not fight, except for Sean. And also, they've been drugged and tortured, which, probably makes it a little harder to defend yourself. So they get separated, get the shit beat out of them, and lose the only ally they had. They spend the night in the woods, sitting in that feeling of defeat. It's the lowest they've been so far, but for right now, they can still climb out of the hole and keep going. Part 6. Just One Yesterday and Trust. In the commentary for the Youngblood Chronicles, the video for Just One Yesterday is described as having a sort of post-apocalyptic Walking Dead type tone, and that's incredibly fitting.
Proud sponsor
There's
of the
so
post-apocalypse.
much Walking Dead,
Yeah.
slow movement over long distances.
A consistent theme in a lot of post-apocalyptic stories is trust, the wariness to trust in a world that's imploded on itself, but the absolute necessity to find people you can trust and who will trust you. Trying to find someone, anyone, to help you when you need it, and what the desperation to survive does to people. That's what this segment is about. The band is separated and alone in an unfamiliar place, they've been through hell, and for right now, survival is the top priority. Let's see how the apocalypse treats them. Pete picks an apple from a tree, eats it, and hacks up a bloody snake. Now, listen, I already said you're in the wrong place for biblical analysis. I'm not going to unpack the bloody snake apple in a biblical context. I'm going to unpack it in a trauma context. Apples were a part of the Young Volcanoes feast. The feast where they were all force-fed Patrick's insides. That was also the first time the snake appeared. Whether or not any of them are aware that's what they ate, they're down from the high now, and given the consistent flashbacks to the feast alongside the torture in Alone Together, there's an awareness of that memory as traumatic. What they've gone through, and are still going through, is haunting them. That's what the snake is. That's why they all cross paths with it. It's the unifying symbol of their trauma. It ties them together even while they're apart. It was present when their captors began the band's torment as a unit, and it's present now, as their exhaustion and desperation for survival overshadows their personhood in the eyes of everyone they reach out to. Back to Pete, specifically, for now. Relying on the land for food failed him, so he makes his way to a parking lot and seeks help from a mother and daughter. For obvious reasons, the haggard, bloody man is seen as a threat to this woman and her child. Out of fear, they run, refusing him help, and when Pete pursues in desperation, the mother goes on the defensive to protect her kid. Self-preservation and defense of loved ones takes precedence to trusting strangers, even if they might be people in need. Common survival scenario, and thus common apocalyptic scenario. Another common thing in the apocalypse is beans.
Beans sponsor the apocalypse, I think.
Andy comes across a sleeping homeless man and tries to steal his can of beans. He's reached the kind of desperation that leads people in similar situations with similar needs to turn on each other. The struggle of survival when it's every man for himself. You don't try to trust or earn trust. You either take something someone else needs or you get caught and get nothing. Joe comes upon a house where a woman is out hanging her laundry. She runs away from him immediately. He barely gets a chance to ask for help before being deemed a threat, but he still gets something he needs. He rips a sheet off the clothesline and wraps it around his leg injury. The mistrust doesn't get him help or shelter or food, but he gets the bare minimum he needs to keep moving, and when you're trying to survive, staying on the move can be the most important thing. Patrick makes it out to the side of the road and hitchhikes, getting picked up by this song's featured artist, Foxes. He has the easiest time and finds someone willing to help a guy covered in blood with a hook for a hand.
He looks trustworthy.
He's visibly a little wary of her, probably for that exact reason, but he still accepts her help because, of course, he has to. There's something a little off about her, and at one point she leans out the window and leaves Mandor Handhook Cardor to take the wheel for a bit, but she's still the best option he has. By the end, they find Andy, Joe, and Pete, and Foxes takes them to the hospital. It seems like the worst of it might be over. Psych! Foxes has black eyes and the snake is back. It's bad omens by the double, bitch! Foxes, or the Death Adder if you watch the long-form cut, turns on the radio. Patrick flies into a rage. Andy, Joe, and Pete make a break for the hospital, and Patrick chases after, with clear intent to kill. Mistrust in survival situations comes from fear of danger, fear of betrayal, fear of losing your own resources. In part, it comes from seeing the people around you as less deserving of the survival you seek. Less than human, or at least less human than you are. Andy values his own needs as a person more than the homeless man's, and vice versa. The parking lot mother and the laundry woman both view Pete and Joe respectively as more threat than person, and the Death Adder values Patrick as a weapon, not as a person. The one person who gives the band her trust is the person they shouldn't have trusted. And as soon as it becomes clear that the only people they can afford to trust are each other, it's already too late. They don't even have that luxury anymore. Part 7. Where did the party go, and the crossroads of fear and rage. Alright, here we go. This one's my favorite. This is the hot girl shit. Patrick chases the rest of the band into a hospital, abandoned and labeled with an anti-music symbol on the wall. This was never going to be a safe place. Andy, Joe, and Pete split up to hide. We'll talk about them first. They each prioritize something different in their fear. Andy stays where he is and uses the resources around him to treat one of his wounds. Pete finds a phone with no power source and has to find somewhere to plug it in so he can call for help. He risks his own safety, but succeeds, calling the police. Joe struggles to find an adequate hiding place, but won't chance moving rooms at the risk of being caught. He stays out in the open in his frustration, and Patrick spots him. Let's talk about what exactly Patrick sees in this segment. There's a split in perspective as we follow Patrick. We see what's actually happening, and we see what he's experiencing. The cool blue lights throughout the hospital flicker like they're broken. In Patrick's perspective, they strobe with color, like party lights. In reality, he doesn't sing, but in his own perspective, he does. At the start, he sees a receptionist at the empty desk who points him in the right direction and staggers after him. As he wanders the hospital, in every empty room and corner, he comes across zombie patients and staff who follow behind him as he goes. What he sees is a party full of single-minded staggerers like him, but it's not a party he seems to want to be at. The way true reality and Patrick's reality parallel here is incredibly interesting to me. He moves with slower, more focused determination in the real world, but through his own perspective his movement is erratic. He's surrounded by noise, people, flashing colors. His rage is the constant, because just like at the end of Alone Together, the only thing he's really aware of is who his enemy is. This is how I think it works. The initial procedure overwhelmed Patrick's system with sensory overload to exhaust him into suggestibility. Because the conditioning was interrupted, all he has is the music trigger, a continuous perception of sensory overload, and the vague recognition of a cause, and by extension, a target. He's effectively no thoughts head empty beyond that. He's running off adrenaline and a need to stop the overload. Silence the noise. Kill his bandmates. Andy, Joe, and Pete are the fear in this segment. The way they each respond to the scenario. Resourcefulness, finding a way to reach out for help, trying to hide. Patrick, in reality, is the rage, single-minded, violent fury. The party vision is the crossroads, representing what's happening in Patrick's mind. The disorientation, the overload, the aimlessness save for one thing. The need to make it stop. Truly, this is the most relatable part of the story. I too fly into a murderous rage when I'm overstimulated. When Patrick gets to Joe, the flashing back and forth between reality and party vision doesn't stop, but nothing changes visually except the lights. Cool flickering blue and strobing red. His perception of what he's doing, his intent to kill, is a constant. Rage, fueled by adrenaline and the fear conditioned into him, is the constant. It only lets up when Joe is dead. The immediate urge of his unfinished conditioning satisfied, Patrick emerges from his trance, and the rage disappears. He's faced with what he did, the consequence of his loss of self and control. This is when Patrick's dehumanization extends beyond just how his tormentors treat him, and he begins to internalize it. Part 8. Death Valley and Choice, or lack thereof. We start with Joe in an elevator, the in-between of the afterlife that either takes its passengers to heaven or hell. It rises towards the light of heaven, then suddenly stops. Sam is back. A kid, innocent by nature but corrupted into something sinister and killed violently. Sam finds himself the operator of the in-between. True neutrality. Sam's also a well-documented little shit, though, so he takes Joe's fate into his own hands, making a choice he, as evidenced by both the elevator's initial ascent as well as the ending of the video, has no right to make. He presses a button and the elevator descends to hell. Joe gets no choice in the matter regardless. He adapts to what he's given, though, and it seems like hell might not be so bad if it's this sick of a party all the time. As for the rest of the band, in the land of the living, they're having less of a blast. At the police station, Patrick's thrown in a holding cell while Andy and Pete are left to explain what's been happening. Patrick seemingly gets no option to even try and explain himself, and the cop questioning Andy and Pete doesn't believe a word and screams at them before storming out. Can I get an A-cab, baby? As they sit there, a note slides under the door matching the lyrics of the song. After presumably being released from questioning, Andy and Pete choose to trust this note and head to the address where they meet the informant. Undercover as a vixen, the informant gives Andy and Pete the lowdown on the organization that's been targeting them, what they want, who's in charge, and where they operate. She arms them with the coolest weapons I have ever fucking seen. I want that snare crossbow! Whether the informant was always an infiltrator or if she's a former vixen deserting, she chooses her side. She chooses to reach out and help Andy and Pete and extend to them the choice to keep fighting, a choice they may not have had without her. She brings hope back to their fight and identity back to Andy and Pete. No longer reduced to victimhood and suffering, they choose to be fighters, and they know what they're fighting now. Back in hell, Joe's sick party with the devil is interrupted so he can be escorted up to heaven where he was supposed to be in the first place. Again, he gets no choice in the matter. Despite ending up in heaven being a narrative good, it kinda doesn't feel any better to watch than him being sent to hell. I mean, at least for me. Like, he was having a good time. Does the torment never cease? Can a man not just do drugs with the devil? Must God shove his nose into everything? It's just the lack of choice of it all, you know what I mean? Poor Joe can't even get some damn autonomy in the afterlife. Simultaneously, Patrick, who's only been able to stew in what's happened for this entire segment, gets released into the care of two vixens who've paid his bail and come to collect. They drag him off as he begs the cop for help, and his pleas are ignored. He has no choice but to go with them. While Andy and Pete have had choice and identity returned to them by the informant, Joe maintains about as much autonomy dead as he had alive, and Patrick continues on a downward spiral of losing himself. Part 9. Rat-a-tat and Control. Rat-a-tat begins with an opening monologue to give us our first real taste of the cult ideology the vixens operate under.
We are every old, broken toy, born again and again. As we turn the hype into hope, we silence the noise.
Rallied by the head bitch in charge, Courtney Love, the vixens are agents of chaos and destruction, and what they want to destroy is music. Art. Earnest, human expression. Cults prey on the vulnerable and use manipulation tactics to make them reliant on the organization, to isolate them from the rest of the world and strip their identity down so it reflects what the organization represents, so they can be used. The vixens chant and work their destructive assembly line as a unit, and they all dress in similar outfits with similar hairstyles. They aren't individuals. In a way, they've been just as dehumanized as the four leads. They exist to serve and represent the organization and the ideology it preaches. This cult's next victim is Patrick. He's dragged through the headquarters and strapped to a chair in front of a flashing projection on the wall, hooked up by the temples to machinery. The imagery echoes Alone Together at the same time a lyrical callback to Alone Together occurs in the song.
I said, oh,
Imagery and messages flash rapid fire in front of him as electric currents course through his brain, flooding his system with stimuli. The conditioning already present in his mind clashes with the sense of identity and control he has left as the mental barrage overpowers him and he starts to chant along with the vixens. Once he's stopped struggling, they bring him to Courtney, who, in case you forgot, has the briefcase. Patrick's lost grip on himself entirely and succumbed to the cult's control. He's internalized and accepted the identity they've forced on him and the ideology it represents. At this point, Andy and Pete have snuck into the headquarters using the informant's card, and when they make their way to Courtney, Patrick's already there. He moves to protect her, and when Pete grabs the briefcase, Patrick gives chase without thinking twice. Pete isn't a person to him. He's prey. Patrick isn't a person to Courtney and her cult. He's a hunting dog. And when Andy faces off with Courtney alone, she doesn't flinch, because he isn't a person to her. He isn't even a threat. He's an annoyance, and he's easily disposed of. Part 10. Miss Missing You and Unity. Miss Missing You also opens with a monologue, delivered by Tara Strong, of all people. Did you guys know that Fall Out Boy also appeared on Teen Titans Go with Tara Strong? Because I know that.
The Teen Titans need you!
Is Batman involved?
Do you want him to be involved?
Oh yeah.
Look at them. Look at Andy. Anyway, the monologue describes two friends at the end of a burning city, reveling in the destruction, enjoying each other's company.
They just sat back, laughing at the wounded city. Each breath sucking in ashes and fumes, knowing that they were paid to remember the past. He blew out a hot breath and said, "Burn it all."
It plays over Pete making his way through a bleeding desert, stopping to catch his breath, when Patrick catches up to him. The endless chase continues. The monologue describes a mutual acceptance of destruction. The story shows a mutually assured destruction. First off, I'd like to note that this video is in black and white, which gives it a really distinct feeling from the rest of the series. This is the lowest, bleakest point of the story. Andy and Joe are dead, Patrick's out of his mind, and Pete's the last one truly standing. It's friend against friend, corruption against hope, dark against light. Everything in between is gray. Throughout the video, Patrick pursues Pete through a trailer park community in the desert. The way the members of this community interact, or don't interact, with them is what I want to discuss for this segment. Pete manages to lose Patrick briefly on the road when what I assume is the revving of motorcycle engines causes Patrick to double over. Sound sensitivity, more evidence towards overstimulation being a factor in his conditioning. Pete hides out in a lot of abandoned cars, where there's one other person, a woman with a baby doll. She watches Pete hide, and when Patrick catches up, she climbs out of her car and points him in Pete's direction. This woman has no stake in what's going on. She has no idea what's going on. She just sees a hunter and prey and aids the hunter for fun. She is also the only person in this trailer community to directly interact with our leads until the end of this video. As we'll see, everyone else they pass ignores them entirely. Patrick chases Pete through the front yard of one of the trailer homes, where a strongman-looking guy pours a watering can over a statue of Jesus Christ while pulling on a chain. The chain runs through a fence around the neck of a younger man who's painting the fence white. The symbolism is pretty direct, and it reflects back to the song lyrics as well. One of the chorus lines of Miss Missing You is, a white picket fence is symbolic of the American dream and middle-class suburban life. It represents safety and security, something that, in the context of both the song and the story, has been lost. The lyrical meaning of picket fence alongside this imagery communicates a forceful hold on the concept of the American dream, the idea of preserving traditional values through abuse. Neither man acknowledges Pete or Patrick in the slightest. The next character we pass looks like an old woodworker or some kind of eccentric craftsman. It's admittedly difficult to tell what he's doing, but he's working outside the house Pete and Patrick pass through. They have a brief scuffle outside before Pete manages to escape again, and this man also does not acknowledge them, pretty lost in what he's doing. Patrick, on the hunt for Pete again, comes across a little girl playing with electrical sound equipment. Aggravated by the noise, he makes for the cords hanging out the window, clear intention to kill the girl. Pete runs in to stop him, protecting the girl and giving away his position simultaneously. They fight again in front of an outdoor pool and then inside a house. When the house fills with smoke, implying a gas leak, they run out to the back. All the people they pass completely ignore them. The man in the pool, the woman with the gas mask, the tanning bed duo. This community is isolated, and so are the people in it. This is their structure, each living in their own little worlds and ignoring anything that might disrupt their personal security. It's this single-minded focus they all share. They're unified within their isolationist lifestyle, all entirely dedicated to maintaining their own ideal status quo and comfort by any means possible, including ignoring outside intrusion and potential threats. Because why examine our culture and surroundings as they relate to the values we want to maintain so badly and unpack that, when single-minded self-focus is so much easier? Finally, Pete and Patrick come to a standoff in the middle of the trailer park, and Pete actively threatens Patrick for the first time. For this entire segment, every time they've physically fought, Pete hasn't gone on the offensive, even though he's armed and knows Patrick is out to kill. His fighting is entirely defensive. Not meant to hurt Patrick, just escape him. Because that's still his friend. That's still a person. That's still Patrick. But now, he holds out his machete and they advance on each other, united in violence. Patrick gets the first blow. As they fight, the community circles around them, egging them on. Everyone they've passed, and others, including the little girl Pete saved. The isolationist community comes together only to indulge in the savagery of two outsiders killing each other. Unification through violence, and a shared othering of our leads. Pete and Patrick hit the deepest depths of dehumanization in this moment. They both fight to kill, surrounded by people completely unaware of what they're fighting for. Neither has the luxury of seeing the other as a person, let alone a friend, anymore. And the trailer people watching them don't see them as people either. They're only worth acknowledging to any of them as entertainment. They're fighting dogs. Patrick kills Pete. As he stands, he feels his own wound from the fight and realizes he's dying too. As he falls to the ground, with the show over, the crowd disperses. A pair of vixens take the briefcase. The thing the entire band suffered and fought for winds up right back in the hands of the enemy. Pete and Patrick lie dead on the ground together, unified once again in mutual destruction. Part 11. Save Rock and Roll and Redemption. The final part opens with Courtney and her cult reveling in their assured victory, continuing their systematic destruction of musical symbols, even tormenting more kidnapped people. Meanwhile, the briefcase is delivered to the true underlying evil, a secondary organization of cultists in masks.
And this is where we introduce the idea that there is a darker presence
Yeah.
beyond Courtney
Yeah.
out there. And the idea is that these people just only care about mayhem.
Yeah, and kind of playing off the idea that, that Courtney and her people aren't necessarily
They're damaged.
evil. They're damaged. They really genuinely believe that they're trying to protect everybody from these guys.
Following the title card for this finale, we see Patrick in the afterlife elevator with Sam. Patrick's still in his trance state even after his death, indicating the depths of his dehumanization. He was violated in body, mind, and soul, and he internalized all of it, becoming as barely human as he was treated. Sam, taking his operator job seriously now after fucking with Joe's fate, offers Patrick something he hasn't had for the duration of this series: a choice. He takes the elevator to a room where a man is tied up and blindfolded. A knife sits on a pillow next to Patrick. Patrick sees someone with their agency and identity stripped away, just as his was. The same conditions that caused the people around him, as well as himself, to view him as less than human. Given the choice, he breaks the cycle by recognizing the stranger's humanity and right to live. He chooses mercy, renouncing the identity forced upon him in favor of the person he truly is. He recognizes his own humanity in this choice too. He breaks through his conditioning. Basically mirroring their first interaction, Sam extends Patrick the bare minimum of human recognition by giving him this test. When Patrick passes, his humanity reclaimed as the elevator ascends to heaven, Sam smiles. In heaven, Patrick reunites with Andy, Joe, and Pete, all of whom immediately accept and forgive him. They've escaped their endless torment, their injuries are healed, and they're together. Their humanity has been returned to them.
I like it that in heaven we finally got to wash our faces and get haircuts.
Yes.
The idea is becoming human again.
They receive communion, darkly mirrored by the rituals of the masked cult, and meet God, played by Elton John, because, of course. I think everyone knew, as soon as the series' religious themes got overt, that when Elton John appeared he was going to be God. It's just the only option. Patrick questions being forgiven. But but still accepts his literal God-given duty to defend the faith as Elton God hands out instruments to the band. As they play, they're transported back down to Earth and into the Vixens' headquarters. One of the Vixens approaches with a bat, while energy beams shoot out from the band's instruments, effectively
taste the rainbow, motherfucker!
The Vixens good.
Guys, I think this is a magic song. Are you serious?
This is the transformative power of music, obviously. Art, in all forms, is expression, a sharing of the human experience as it varies across the world. The propensity of art to foster discussion, connection, understanding, and change within people who open themselves up to letting art touch them. The Vixens killed Fall Out Boy, but couldn't kill their art because art is unkillable. From the beyond, their music lives on. Their indomitable human spirit could never fully be crushed. The band's art, their humanity, touches the Vixens and changes them for the better. They stop their destruction. They release the people they have captive, now seeing them as people. Simultaneously, as Courtney and the Vixens open themselves up to the music and gain their redemption, the masked cultists remain untouched. They open the briefcase, releasing this demon thing. Now, this was a bit of a controversial reveal, from what I remember. People didn't really like this. I didn't really like this. I found it disappointing and a little nonsensical, but it's been almost 10 years at this point. I've sat with it for a while, and I've changed my mind. I like this. And I mean, in fairness, it's not really any more out there than the rest of the series. There could have been anything in the briefcase. Why not a demon of pure destruction? This does beg the question, though, why did Fall Out Boy have it in the first place? What were they going to do with it? I think the answer is as simple as it needs to be. They were going to protect it. They were going to carry the power to destroy with abandon and refrain from unleashing it. All people have the capacity for good and evil inside them. By extension, the art we create has the capacity to do good and do harm. We make the choice. The briefcase and the thing inside of it represents that choice. In the hands of the masked cult, who have completely abandoned any signifier of individual identity in pursuit of destruction, the capacity for violence is unleashed. No one is safe from the resulting bloodbath, but amidst the chaos, the defenders of the faith rally together. United again, their bond strengthened by the turmoil they've endured together, they square off with the demon directly. They choose to fight, and this time they win. And personally, I think this is the best ending shot of anything I've ever seen. A brief aside to talk about the music. I love all these songs. Save Rock and Roll is one of my top 3 Fall Out Boy albums, and I'd be remiss to not acknowledge how inextricable the music is to the aesthetic experience of the Youngblood Chronicles, like, by nature. These are music videos. They're shot and edited in a very particular way compared to standard films. It's a different kind of storytelling. Each part is linked to its song, and the narrative as a whole is linked to the album. I can explain the story all day. I can tell you the drama and cinematic sound of The Phoenix is a phenomenal tone setter. I can tell you the Young Volcanoes and Alone Together videos both contrast in sound and visuals in a way that's super engaging. I can tell you that the aggressive party song sound of Where Did the Party Go works perfectly with the split perspective zombie hallucination slasher sequence. I can tell you about the urgency of Death Valley's sound and how well it fits the transitional story beats. I can tell you that Rat-a-Tat scratches an itch in my brain with its translation of Courtney's feature into cult propaganda. I can tell you how much Miss Missing You aches to listen to and how well that fits with the narrative tragedy of the video. I'll never be able to put it all into words properly, though, so if you haven't seen YBC and you made it this far, I can't recommend enough that you go actually watch it and get the full experience. Now that that's out of the way, let's wrap this puppy up, shall we? Part conclusion: The Youngblood Chronicles and Rising from the Ashes. I recently watched YBC with a couple friends who hadn't seen it before, and after Miss Missing You, one of them asked, "Is that the end?" And I thought that was an interesting question, because, yeah, Miss Missing You could have easily been the end. It's not hard to imagine that is the case. The heroes are turned against each other, they die off one by one, and at the end the last 2 left destroy each other. They try, but they lose, and the audience never concretely learns what they were even fighting for. It's a good, tragic narrative. It could have worked thematically. It wouldn't have been hard to leave it there. And I doubt never finding out what was in the briefcase would have been any more disappointing for some than the demon reveal. Probably less so if they'd left it more of a mystery. But the important thing to note about YBC is its medium. It's not just a straightforward film. It's a story constructed piece by piece as they went along with little to no prior planning, made to fit an album of pre-existing songs. They made a movie around the soundtrack. That means there were unspoken rules, one of them being the conclusion had to be framed around the last song on the album. I think that's why the ending can feel a bit strange. At least it felt strange to me at first. I was 13 when YBC concluded. I'd been following it for over a year, and as mentally ill as basically the entire rest of the series made me, the ending just didn't quite hit the same at the time. I rewatched the other videos, like The Phoenix, Alone Together, and Where Did the Party Go, individually, over and over and over again, but I didn't revisit Save Rock and Roll on its own, and I moved on from my YBC fixation pretty quick after it ended. And I can be pretty obsessive. Something just being over isn't usually the main reason my fixation dies. I think at the time there was a disconnect between the total destruction of the rest of the series and the, in spite of it all, triumph of the ending. I liked it then, but I recognized a clumsiness in the way I wasn't entirely conscious of, and it dampened the story as a whole for me, just a little. I remembered Save Rock and Roll as my least favorite part of YBC for a long time. I came back to it in 2021 remembering that, but not quite feeling that way anymore upon rewatch. It's still a bit of a clumsy ending, but the entire story is clumsy in the same way. It's a clumsy narrative by nature, and you can feel it. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I love clumsy art. All of my art is way clumsier than this. All of my stories are told flying by the seat of my pants. There's something earnest and honest about that kind of storytelling. Just because it's not the cleanest doesn't mean it can't still be valuable and effective as art, right? I tend to latch on tighter to stories with strong core themes that either compel me or connect with me personally, than to stories that may be objectively better by nature of being tightly and competently written and executed. That's why YBC sticks with me, because the thematic core of being dehumanized and the way it's explored is still so compelling to me. Every individual theme I examined in the body of my analysis contributes to this core idea, and the finale's theme of redemption shifts it from dehumanization to reclamation. The ending turns the story from the completely bleak tragedy it could have been into something also about remembering who you are and finding recovery through love and creation. Retroactively, it also gives the MacGuffin of the briefcase a symbolic meaning, or at least the symbolic meaning I'm assigning to it. As I said, in my read, the briefcase and the fucked up guy inside it represents the choice to do harm or good, both in your life and with what you create. It starts in the hands of our heroes, musicians, who choose to do good and protect that power from people who would choose harm. Right here, this moment, is when the band as a collective is dehumanized. Because of the briefcase, not the hand. I gotta be super clear, I'm not saying Patrick losing his hand makes him less human. In fact, if I was in charge, he wouldn't get it back in heaven because I don't love those implications. In my read, it's not the hand, it's the briefcase. Creation is a fundamental aspect of human nature, and metaphorically, that's the first thing taken from them. Once they're stripped of that and that capacity for choice, their lives and everything that happens to them is out of their hands, and they're less human to everyone around them. The betrayal of the people around them starts this all off, and from that point, they're disoriented and disengaged with reality, tortured, their livelihood is destroyed for fun, they're physically defeated by toddlers and lose their one ally, and they realize no one in the outside world trusts them enough to help them. Up until Where Did the Party Go, there's still a sense they have a grasp on their own humanity and each other's. They maintain self-preservation, and they advocate for themselves and each other as best as they can. Joe's death is the beginning of the true downward spiral, because once the group is fractured by rage and has reason to fear each other, there's no recovering. There's very little opportunity to see how Andy and Pete's view of Patrick immediately changes after he kills Joe, but this super brief moment where they see him in shackles is notable. Their concern doesn't change the rift between them, though, and they can't advocate for him anymore. They struggle to advocate for themselves, too, but the informant steps up to help. She's the first person since Sean to see their humanity, and through her they gain some hope and resources to fight, giving them a sliver of their choice back. They get to hold on to their sense of humanity a little longer. Patrick, however, is isolated, torn apart by what he did, and has no capacity for self-advocacy. His friends can't bail him out, so the Vixens do, and they use his vulnerability to drag him further away from himself and into their control. The band was never going to win when they were fractured. They need each other to create. Joe's death was the start of the downward spiral, but Andy's death and Patrick's conversion were the last nails in the coffin. The penultimate showdown between Pete and Patrick never could have been a victory, even if Pete survived. Their identities are both tied exclusively to the briefcase in this segment. Patrick's drive to get it by any means necessary in service to his masters, and Pete's drive to keep it away from Patrick with seemingly no concrete goal beyond that. Pete still maintains grip on his last scrap of humanity in choosing to save the little girl, and in choosing not to hurt Patrick. In the end, though, he has no other option left and abandons that scrap in favor of his need to protect his symbolic humanity. Reduced to dogs fighting for the gain and entertainment of others, they both had to die. As long as they couldn't be united in life, they had to become their worst, most violent selves and destroy each other so they could reunite in death. Joe's death was the death of the band. Once he died, they all had to. Andy and Pete might have had a chance, but as soon as they split up, Andy was doomed, and so was Pete. They all had to die so they could come back together and rise again. The thread is there for all of them, but it's the strongest with Patrick, as I said at the beginning. He's directly tortured not just first, but by far the most. He's reduced to an unwilling meal before the rest have a clue what's going on, and the function of his torture in Alone Together is stripping him of his self-control. He's not just dehumanized, he's straight up turned into a monster. This is an ensemble story, but his arc is central. He's basically the lead. The elevator test is the make or break moment, because for the first time since he lost the briefcase, he's given a choice. The choice of death or mercy. To do harm or good. It's the fact he's given the freedom to make this choice at all that gives him the strength to break through the dehumanization he internalized and reclaim his sense of self. Reconciliation isn't even a question, because Patrick's choice already answers it. His bandmates know he didn't choose to hurt them, and because he's here with them at all, he never would. This is like peak reconciliation just in concept too, because since they're all dead, they're basically seeing each other's souls here. They had the ultimate traumatic falling out, and in the aftermath, they come back together, recognize each other for who they are and how much they love each other, and know they can trust again because they've always seen each other's humanity. They've reclaimed it for themselves, and now that they're back together, they can create again. These dudes love each other so damn much they came back to life about it. And maybe Elton John, God, helped a little too, but like, shut up. Power of love. And art. The finale gives us a the power was inside them all along type moment, because the choice represented by the briefcase was given back to them by the elevator test. Through their bond and their creation, they come back stronger, extend that forgiveness and redemption to the Vixens, and face off with the thing that destroyed them and come out victorious. I think it's really nice. I think it's beautiful. I love it. When I was 12 to 13, I enjoyed this story and Patrick's arc on the hormonal preteen level of 1, thinking liking angst made me cool and edgy, and 2, watching a pretty boy celebrity be turned evil and kill his friend with power cords and spending way too much time imagining I was the one being killed with power cords.
Do that to me.
Now that I'm older, I obviously still think it's hot, fucking look at him, but also, I don't know, there's something cathartic and comforting about these kinds of arcs, isn't there? I think in middle school, part of me was a little disappointed that the story kept going and didn't end in the full-on tragedy of missing you. But as I get older and more acquainted with the worst parts of myself, I find part of what draws me to arcs like Patrick's in this is indulgence in the idea of succumbing to the anger and fear and losing control. Destroying everything, destroying yourself, but still being forgiven at the end. Letting the people you love see those worst parts, seeing the worst parts of them too, and still being able to love each other. Because humanity is full of mess and ugly shit, friends and loved ones hurt each other, and we can work towards our best when we recognize and work with that shit in ourselves and in the people around us. That's the best thing about the Youngblood Chronicles. The loss of control and release of the monster, the destruction of the self and everyone you love and everything around you, the absolute rock bottom, and the reconciliation, the choice to be better in spite of everything and in spite of what you and everyone else might think of you, being welcomed back, understanding yourself because you faced the worst of yourself, choosing to get back up and keep fighting, going through the worst and coming out stronger. To put it simply, being changed like a remix and rising like a phoenix. Or maybe the best thing is how good men look when they're beat up and disheveled and covered in blood. Epilogue, an open invitation for evil Patrick Stump to kill me with his hook. Hey, thanks for watching all that. I hope you liked it. Here's a picture of my cats. Special thanks to my friends who beta read this script for me. I love you very much. And thanks in general to everyone who encouraged me in doing this because, wow, it was daunting. Go check out Zero's Youngblood Chronicles webcomic. Seriously, it's a phenomenal adaptation. It's still going and updates regularly. They're on the Mighty Fall right now, and I can't wait to see how they adapt it all going forward. Link in the description. Seriously, it's great. Thanks to Fall Out Boy for being my favorite band forever and ever. Have a good day. Bye.